Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga review. This one is going to be for Chapter 46, True Identity. So the title here kind of has a bit of a double meaning. I think for the most part the chapter mainly is referring to the idea that Ishiki, is Jigen, Jigen is Ishiki, that being the kind of identity reveal. But because it's on the color page where we have Kashin Koji, it also feels like, given what happens in the chapter, there's also a sense that it's also, this chapter kind of heavily, almost borderline tells us that Kashin Koji is Jiraiya, or Jiraiya is heavily included somewhere along the line in whatever Kashin Koji actually is. Again, I think it's probably going to be a little bit more complicated than just like, it is Jiraiya, but who knows, But either way, it seems like Jiraiya is going to be very heavily involved in this. So I kind of like that double meaning on the title. But overall, very good chapter once again. It continues on the kind of double big kind of plot that we have going on here of both the fight between Kashin Koji and Jigen, as well as the explanation from Amado about the Otsutsukis and specifically Ishiki and all this sort of stuff. You can tell that I think the writers know that this is the big content. This is some of their biggest reveals in the entire series. And so they're taking the time to step by step, so to slowly explain this to us, because this is the most important information so far in the series to get across, and to get across well. And I think that's why they're taking their time. I think in many ways, like this, what I assume is going to be like 3 or 4 chapters of explanation, probably could have been explained in maybe 2, 3. But they're taking their time because it is complicated in a way. It's dealing with some of the more complicated lore aspects of Naruto and Boruto, and they need to recap some of it and introduce a whole new dynamics that connect into the new stuff Boruto has, plus some of the stuff from Naruto. And that's what's so good about this chapter. We have extra backstory for Kaguya in this chapter, as well as big reveals about Ishiki and so on. What the karma mark is finally like fully stated to us here. So in that sense, very successful chapter this time out, and I'm super excited for next month's chapter as well. But I think this chapter is best talked about as we go through it, sort of page by page, and discuss the big moments as they happen. So the chapter is available officially on Viz.com for free. So if you want to read along with me, go to Viz.com and you can find the chapter up there. Chapter 46, of course. But yeah, let's get into it. The first page is basically kind of a recap. It's just, here's where we are. Kashin Koji has confronted Jigen and revealed that he is there. His supreme objective, his reason for existing, is to kill Jigen. Kill Ishiki, whatever way you want to call it. So we obviously, of course, know that Naruto, Shikamaru, Amado, and Sasuke, they're all watching this on Amado's glasses, which are projecting from like the toad who's right there in the middle of the action. And so the reaction here is like, they're both members of Kara. Why are they fighting each other? And this is where Amado says, Koji and I were both playing at being members. Our true motive was to take him down. Jigen was severely drained in that battle against you. This is the perfect opportunity we won't ever see again. It's now or never. So that's a big one, because it immediately says, okay, who is Amado prior to joining Kara? Just like, who is he? How does he know this stuff about the Otsutsukis? He's obviously learned some stuff by being part of the group, but why did he join the group with the intent of doing this in the first place? And why did he sort of, in a way, know or think to include Kashin Koji in on this? So there's a bit of backstory here that we're still sort of waiting for, of like, they were playing at being members, so that suggests that they went in with the motive the entire time to do this. What were they beforehand? And that's very interesting to me, and that adds a whole other layer to the idea that he wants asylum. He's revealing himself, he's revealing his plan here, and he wants protection. But what was he before? But anyway, we cut back over to the fight. Jigen sort of mocks Kashin Koji, what he just said. Reason for existing? You're a pathetic man, no matter which way you put it. In the end, you're nothing more than a tool being used by Amado. And he just says, I'm fine with being a tool, for that's what shinobi are. And they rush into battle against each other. And the battle here, I actually really like it. I like that it's sort of straight to the point, straight in with the big, interesting, unique jutsu. Very little what I'd call like filler fighting of just like kind of punch kick. It's just straight down to the big moves that has meaning, because this is here to set up something that will happen in the next stage of the battle towards the end of the chapter. So he starts off with the flame bomb jutsu, firing a few of them at him. Jigen, of course, absorbs it, as we would expect. But Kashin Koji gets behind him and uses toad oil bombs. So he soaks him in the oil, there's toads all over him, and then that's when he activates it. Boom, Jigen goes up in flames here. Big, really powerful jutsu, and this is where we get the big kind of like tease. Naruto watches this. We get a full speech bubble of him just going ... and then in his head he says, the way that masked guy fights, it's like. And the only way to interpret this is that toad oil bomb is like kind of Jiraiya's like signature jutsu in a way, as like a toad sage and so on. That's so signature to Jiraiya. That's what Naruto is thinking. That's what we as the audience are thinking. And it's there for a reason. And now they've drawn our attention to that. Oh, our interpretation is correct because Naruto is thinking the same way. So that's very cool. But of course, this is still a jutsu. So of course, Jigen absorbs it and charges at Kashin Koji again. So they go into some taijutsu here. And usually I think this can be a little bit kind of filling up page count, some of the taijutsu things. But this actually works as they go straight into like the hyper speed, like super fast taijutsu. It really gets across the energy of how quickly they're fighting. He uses some shadow clones at this point. And then we see Jigen activate some of his abilities here. So we see him take out some of the shadow clones in kind of pretty brutal ways here. He activates the chakra rods ability that he was using before, where he shrinks them down and sort of like implants them in his opponents, and then he expands them so it acts like they're getting sort of like skewered or impaled immediately. So we saw this in the fight against like Naruto and Sasuke from before, and here he is using it once again, his ability to shrink and expand things, including himself, as he shrinks down, dodging a punch, goes by Kashin Koji's head, and activates the chakra rods in Kashin Koji's eyes. So this takes out another one of the clones. That's probably one of the more brutal clone takedowns we've seen, chakra rods to the eyes. But he says, it seems you were really serious about turning on me, Kashin Koji. I do hope you're prepared to die. He just says, that's my line, Lord Jigen, or rather, Otsutsuki Ishiki. So we basically knew this from the last chapter, but this is kind of confirming it again, 100%, just stating it right here. Jigen is Otsutsuki Ishiki. That's just it. And so Naruto has that reaction. Amado continues with the explanation. That's right. That is Jigen's true identity, or rather, it would be more correct to say his real form. Otsutsuki Ishiki. He came to our planet long ago, along with Otsutsuki Kaguya. So that's a big reveal. As I mentioned earlier, their objective was to plant the divine tree and harvest its chakra fruit. But then a problem arose. Kaguya suddenly turned against Ishiki. And I really like this, adding in extra detail to Kaguya, because they previously explained earlier in Boruto, a bunch of chapters ago, and they seem to suggest that this was just the way Otsutsukis did things, was that they come in pairs. Two of them always come. It's always like a duo. And so Kaguya then sort of stood out for seemingly coming on her own. But then you bring in the idea that a lot of her planning with the sort of Zetsu army and stuff like that was to sort of prepare for what she felt was like the oncoming onslaught of other members of her clan. So it makes Kaguya a more interesting character just by adding in some extra backstory to her of like her story is different than a lot of the other Otsutsukis. It has similar elements, but because she sort of went solo on it in a way, you definitely see her in a different light. And you wonder like, oh, where does this link in with the anime arc that went very heavy into her own backstory, Hagoromo's backstory, Indra, Ashura's backstory? I'm assuming that this incident with Ishiki happens before we really meet her in that arc. So this backstory that we're getting in this chapter is like the earliest in Kaguya's life we've ever seen. And then probably almost like immediately afterwards, she's found by the others. And what happens in that arc in the anime. So that's really cool to see. Amado continues though, I don't know Kaguya's motives, whether it was personal enmity or wanting the fruit all to herself. There's no way to find out now, but the important thing is that it happened. Caught off guard, Ishiki suffered enough damage to be on the verge of death, but he managed to take over the body of a novice monk who happened to be nearby and survived. That unfortunate man was Jigen. So this is the reveal we've kind of been waiting for. Who is Jigen? We've known for a few chapters, I think now, that Jigen was just this person. Jigen wasn't an Otsutsuki himself, but, you know, the vessel for Ishiki. And then we find out that he was just basically a nobody. He just happened to be the person closest by a dying Ishiki, and that's who he decided to take over to save himself. It presents a few interesting ideas. One, it means that Jigen, as we meet him now, has been alive for a very, very long time, given that it's the same vessel Ishiki's been in since the time of Kaguya, which is like, it predates Shinobi and all that sort of stuff because of where this takes place in the timeline. So this is kind of like ancient history in Naruto. So that's interesting, just that Ishiki is in Jigen, who's basically kind of like an ancient human, effectively, to a degree. So that's pretty cool. It confirms like a lot of the theories that people had of like, oh, was Jigen this kind of mysterious character who was able to defeat an Otsutsuki before? But no, he was just a nobody. The person that did the damage to cause Ishiki to need to karma mark someone, basically, was Kaguya. Very, very interesting. But we continue. So they're like, takeover. And then Sasuke asks, is that when Ishiki marked Jigen with karma? Otsutsuki used the karma to take over others' bodies, right? And this is when Amado decides, I'll give you more information when I get your answer, Lord Hokage, about if you're going to give me asylum or not. So he goes over the idea of sort of like, I'm formally requesting asylum. I know the laws of the land. I know that you as the Hokage can make this decision without the daimyo needing to be involved. And I want it now. I want that decision in writing before I continue on. Naruto is forced to agree to this. He will get the asylum. But the paperwork will take a little bit because they're short on time. There's stuff happening right now. So he's kind of like, okay, I'm going to keep the explosive in Shikadai until I get that paperwork, but we'll continue with the explanation. So just a quick kind of sidetrack here just to get across. This is the situation happening. The whole seeking asylum, defection thing. Makes sense to reference it again, but let's get back to the details, the information. So he says, very well, this is the truth about karma. Sasuke's inference actually isn't that far off the mark, except it's not quite that simple either. Let me explain using Boruto's case as an example, because Boruto's case ends up actually being the sort of standard case for how karma works, whereas the whole Jigen Ishiki case, as we learn later in the chapter, ends up being a more complicated example. So Boruto's the perfect example here. His karma was embedded by Otsutsuki Momoshiki. So then what exactly happened to Boruto? During the battle, Momoshiki converted himself into data, replicated himself, and implanted that into Boruto's body. And the way they show this is they show the standard diamond mark that is the base form of the karma mark, and they show this kind of really nice image of just kind of 3D wise. The way to interpret it is that, yes, it's just a marking on his hand, but it is this sort of like data spike kind of like buried into his flesh in a way. And the data is sort of, spreading out in a way like throughout Boruto's body. It's a nice kind of representation of it. Do you understand? In short, karma is a highly compressed Otsutsuki backup file. And they're like, what? The compressed file slowly extracts over time. That is going on even this very minute, and when all of the data is fully extracted, Boruto's body will be overwritten by Momoshiki's data, and Boruto himself will completely cease to exist. Again, the visuals here are quite nice. They show basically an example of what the karma mark would look like if it took over most of his body. of it going all the way up his arm, all the way up his like neck, covering his eye and stuff like that, and that it goes all the way down his leg, highlighting that when the mark is able to fully take over his body, that means the data has been fully extracted, and that's when Momoshiki can choose to basically return fully. And as they explain later, the markings will then go away and it will just be Momoshiki's new body. Boruto won't even be there anymore, and that's what the karma does. It's this backup file that extracts, gradually takes over the person's body, and then kind of goes away once the person is back, the Otsutsuki is back. So that's how the Otsutsuki accomplish rebirth. And so Naruto is shocked by this. Are you kidding me? How can we save him? How do you block the process? And he says, as far as I know, there isn't a way. Although you could probably prevent Momoshiki's rebirth if you killed Boruto right now. And that's not an option they're going to take, of course. Boruto's like, I'm going to become Momoshiki. He's stunned by this. Sasuke then asks a question. Let's say Momoshiki does get reborn in Boruto's body. What happens to the karma? Good question. The extracted Otsutsuki data dissipates throughout the whole body, so like a sugar cube you put in your tea that eventually dissolves completely, the karma mark will also disappear. That sort of, like I said earlier, kind of makes sense. That if they want the body to be their own, the karma mark itself is just there as the data itself, and then when all that data is out, the data is the Otsutsuki. So once it's all out there, they're just in control, and the idea for the markings aren't needed anymore. So, Sasuke says, that's odd. Otsutsuki Ishiki took over Jigen's body, but he still has the karma. Why didn't it disappear? And they're all like, yeah, that does seem kind of contradictory. What's going on? Sasuke continues, the fact that Jigen's body still displays the karma means Ishiki still hasn't revived, right? The same as Boruto with Momoshiki. Your explanation is flawed. Amado sort of starts laughing at this point, but he ultimately says that, like I told you, like it's a complicated story. I'm not messing with anyone. Sasuke has brought up quite an astute point, but there's a huge misunderstanding. Ishiki did take over Jigen's body. However, it was not by using a karma like I just explained. The reason is simple. He was so weakened that he really was about to die. To implant a karma is a pretty big undertaking. He didn't have enough energy for it. And the imagery we see here is the injury that Ishiki suffered, finally revealed to us in the chapter. Kaguya ripped him in half, basically. Like, you can see his spine, his legs, and like looks like his pelvis are like completely missing. Like, it's just his like lower half. It's just his upper half, sorry. Very brutal injury, and that kind of highlights that, whoa, okay, she took him by surprise, but like she just ripped him apart here and left him for dead. And it highlights that, yeah, the Otsutsuki has to plan for like, oh, I could die here, let me prepare the karma kind of data. So he was obviously so taken by surprise he wasn't able to get it ready, and had to do something desperate. So that's a kind of brutal reveal here that Kaguya just ripped him in half. Thus, Ishiki came up with a desperate plan. He performed his secret jutsu, Sukuna Hikona, to shrink his body. So that reveals to us the ability that we've seen Ishiki or Jigen use all this time. His ability to shrink and expand things is called Sukuna Hikona. That's nice to know. And he infiltrated Jigen's body through the ear. He lives within Jigen's body, absorbing nutrients from it, just like a parasite. He eventually came to control Jigen's brain, utter his own words using Jigen's voice, move his arms and legs, and took over Jigen's body for good. But Ishiki still physically exists within Jigen's body. Ishiki embedded a karma into Jigen's body afterwards in order to be reborn in his true form. And this is when they showcase Jigen with the karma mark, the diamond symbol on his chin. And okay, this is a different version from Boruto's. The Boruto one is actually the standard one of, at some point, Momoshiki prepared the Otsutsuki karma mark, prepared the backup file, and at some point implanted it in Boruto, and then he was killed. But because he'd already put the backup data in Boruto, he had the potential to be reborn. And that's what's happening to Boruto now. The karma mark is gradually extracting and growing, and eventually Momoshiki is going to come out in full unless stopped. That's not what happened here. Here we find out that it's kind of specific to Ishiki. He wasn't able to get the backup data ready, so he had to shrink himself using sort of his standard abilities, go inside Jigen's body and sort of just stay alive, literally like a parasite, by just absorbing his own energy. And then eventually he took over his body that way, so he was in control of it without even using the karma mark. But then he did actually put the karma mark into him anyway, just in case he did need to fully take over. So it presents that interesting idea of like Jigen is actually, Ishiki is a unique situation where he's in control of Jigen for like his entire life because he was able to shrink down and control him that way. But to be fully reborn, he would have to fully activate the karma mark, which we'll learn shortly why he hasn't done that, and this is what was set up before, so that's pretty good. We cut over to back to the fight, and we see that Jigen has activated his full sort of Otsutsuki form. He has the horn and stuff like that. He's really going for it now. So they sort of charge at each other again. Jigen smashes Kashinkoji through a wall, through a pillar. But he slides to a stop and activates Dark Swamp, so the floor immediately turns into the Dark Swamp. This catches Jigen and he stops moving, it holds him in place. And this is where we cut away from the fight once again. Naruto says, I don't get it. If Jigen has a karma, why doesn't Ishiki just hurry up and revive? A natural question. It's because the most important factor in embedding a karma is selecting the right target, namely the vessel. Poor Jigen is the one who just happened to be nearby. Ishiki's chakra was too massive for him. Jigen's body is inadequate to be Ishiki's vessel. That makes sense. That was what was said before. I think we even had him sort of referring to the idea of like, you know, I nearly kind of tore this body apart, the amount of power I had to use when fighting Naruto and so on. Highlighting that he can't go full power for that long because this vessel is not good enough. So that was kind of well set up. Amado then says it wouldn't be able to bear his chakra if Ishiki were to reincarnate in Jigen's body. It'd probably die within a few days. Thus, Ishiki decided to pass on being reborn through Jigen and began preparing a new vessel. Before we get into the next line, I just want to kind of note here the idea of like, again, this makes complete sense. Jigen is not a particularly good vessel because he's just a normal person. He is from the era, because of the timeline when it was, before humans even had chakra. So he's absolutely not a good vessel because he wasn't even someone who had like energy within them like initially. Like it was before humans got chakra from ultimately, you know, Kaguya's children stemming on from that. So I really like how that all sort of links into play here of like Ishiki is sort of, his plan hasn't come to fruition because all this time he's been trapped in a body that inherently limits him greatly. So that's pretty cool to know. And Naruto then says, so this new vessel of Ishiki's is Kawaki, isn't it? And this is what we were building to this entire time. The speculation I think most people have is that the flash forward sequence we have from chapter 1 of Boruto likely is Kawaki now as Ishiki's vessel. Probably. So this is where we're beginning to connect a lot of the dots here. This makes complete sense now. All the stuff, the talk of vessels from a bunch of chapters ago is now coming to fruition. But we'll get back to that. So back to the fight. The Dark Swamp is continuing to sort of like suck Jigen in. And he just says, you know, this is a stupid trick. Do you really think you could hold me with this? He breaks out, fires some chakra rods at Kashinkoji. But he just says, no, not at all. And activates a summoning that he prepared earlier. Jigen notes that he prepared it with the Doton from before, and he summons it, he activates it, and fire comes out. And Jigen's like, seriously, fire? This late in the fight, basically? And he just puts his hand out, preparing to absorb it like he did earlier in the fight. This is where the setup comes into play. He absorbed his fire jutsu earlier, and now he's going to absorb this fire jutsu, except it doesn't work. It burns his hand, and it begins to sort of engulf him in flames. Why can't I absorb them? And this is when he explains, "This is no Katon. I summoned real fire from faraway flaming mountains. They're splendid natural flames, not chakra derived, so you can't absorb them using karma." And so Jigen is really taken aback by this. And again, this makes sense. This is not, fire style. It's not fire made from chakra, basically. This is real, actual fire, and that makes it more powerful. In the same way that, what is Sasuke's ability that he uses towards the end of the fight with Itachi, I think it is? He uses that crazy lightning jutsu that is actually summoning, like, I think an actual bolt of lightning, so that's what makes it even more powerful. I completely forget the name of it at this point, but it's the same sort of like effect here of like he found this natural powerful fire and created a summoning out of it, and he can't absorb that because it's not chakra based. So very, very clever here. Of someone who relies so heavily on what is otherwise a near impenetrable defense, this is a great way to get around it. So Amado continues, "We must not let him be reborn in Kawaki's body. Ishiki's power is immense. If he were to return in full form, we won't be able to stop him. It'll be the end of this world. As long as there is karma, Otsutsuki will revive. They are beings who have managed to transcend death. But it's not like it's impossible. I'll teach all of you how to kill an Otsutsuki." That is a fantastic line to end on, because they're going into detail on this, so it seems to be suggesting that he knows the weakness of the Otsutsuki, that either through technology or other means, he knows what the weakness is and how he can take advantage of that to truly, once and for all, kill an Otsutsuki, and probably get around the idea that they can just make the data back up and plant it in someone and be reborn once again. So I really want to know what the technical point is here. Like, I'm guessing it probably does relate somehow to like how the karma mark like works on a technical level, and he can counter it in some way. But he's teaching it to the others. Like, they specifically note Kawaki, Boruto, Naruto, and Sasuke. They're the four he's going to teach about this. But still, very, very cool. And I love how it's like, well, I'll teach you how to kill an Otsutsuki, over the image of Jigen seemingly being burned to death by the fire that Kashin Koji summoned. So, the setup at the end of this chapter would lead you to believe that, like, oh yeah, probably Kashin Koji is going to lose this, and there'll be a reason why we need to know how to kill an Otsutsuki. Not that, like, he's done it already. But at the same time, if he knows, and he's working with Kashin Koji, that means Kashin Koji also probably knows how to kill an Otsutsuki as well. So what is this technical thing? Is it some way to sort of block that data transfer, block their ability to, however specifically they do the karma mark transfer? Because I don't think we know specifically what exact way it was done to Boruto, but either way, I think strong ending to the chapter, great setup for next time out, and just like I said earlier on, in general, very enjoyable chapter, lots of detail. I think the only thing that's maybe a little bit confusing is just that they have presented two very different interpretations of someone being taken over by a karma mark, and Boruto's is like the simple explanation, and it makes complete sense. The Jigen Ishiki one, and how Kawaki sort of plays a role in that as well, is kind of the more confusing part of it, because technically they don't say otherwise. Ishiki is still physically alive within Jigen's body, and he has the karma mark there because, like, I suppose initially he thought he would have to use that body, but now he's found a better body, knowing that that one's going to break down. So are we going to learn something about, like, they can only have one copy of the data? Because there would have to be some sort of a limit on this. There's no way the Otsutsukis can just continuously, like, implant data in you and you and you, so just even if I die multiple times, I can just be reborn in you, and then you, and you. There has to be some sort of a weakness in relation to, like, if they copy that data too many times. Because it just seems too kind of overpowered of an ability if they can literally just constantly make the karma mark and put it on multiple people. Again, I had to go back and reread some of the chapters, but the way Kawaki got his mark is that it seems like Jigen did some weird sciencey stuff to sort of copy or clone his karma mark. That it wasn't sort of like, it's almost like it wasn't like a natural ability that like he just could have done normally. He had to like forcibly like copy it over into Kawaki after the failures of all of the others. So that's why Kawaki is sort of the destined vessel in a way. The question though is, they're presenting this idea of like they need Kawaki. They have to have Kawaki like right next to them to actually perform the sort of transfer between vessels. But that sort of contradicts the kind of Boruto explanation, because Momoshiki died, like his body was like obliterated, but he survives because he had put the karma mark in Boruto. So his consciousness sort of like went away and then came out because the karma mark was in Boruto. In this case, like Ishiki is still alive within Jigen, but Kawaki also has the same karma mark, but the consciousness is only really a factor within Jigen, and it feels like it's just like an actual like computer copy. Like they're presenting it as like it's this like living data in the Momoshiki case and in Jigen's case, but that it's just kind of standard data in Kawaki's case. So I do think they need to explain like what's the significance behind like why Kawaki is now needed, because if Jigen / Ishiki dies, is killed by Kashinkoji here, then technically is it just not automatic that he'll be reborn within Kawaki? Or is it some weird thing of like if that happened he'd be reset to the point at which like the mark was made on Kawaki and he needs to kind of transfer over the newer data or something? Again, maybe I'm overcomplicating it here, but it feels like there's still another step of the explanation on the Kawaki side of things to come out. But still, like, you know, I really enjoyed the chapter. I think probably one of the coolest things definitely was the mention of Kaguya as being the kind of partner to, like, Kaguya having a partner in Ishiki, and the mystery surrounding why she did what she did. That to me feels like, you know, that's going to come out at some point. Ishiki was there. He probably has a little bit more context to what happens. She probably said something before she left him to die. So I'm waiting for that to come out. And I think it's all going to lead back into something really big that links back into the Otsutsuki clan itself, of why Kaguya did what she did, why she prepared for the arrival of other Otsutsukis, as if she was going to like defend the planet from them or whatever. That's what's very interesting in terms of how the Otsutsuki clan operates. I think that's where we're heading in the future of Boruto, to get to the root of what's going on here, why Otsutsukis are becoming kind of more prevalent within the story. But yeah, that's most of my thoughts on this chapter. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.